feel that it's almost redundant me saying anything, but I thought I might anyway in case people don't quite get it. Catholicism can never be nationalism because of its universality. And by that I mean that Catholic is actually another word for universal, with the implication that it's for everyone on earth and therefore cannot be considered part of Christian nationalism, because you would have thought that people who complain about there being too many foreigners in their country would have to logically and necessarily reject Catholicism as a means of ridding themselves of these foreigners in their country, because it is actually Catholicism that is bringing them in. So it is interesting that the cause of transnational migration is in fact caused by the global hegemon, that is America, bombing the crap out of countries and sending the people of those countries to the West as cheap labor. It seems to be part of their business model. So the very fact that America is a global empire is in fact the cause of the immigration coming to America and the rest of the West. And it's happening precisely because America is global hegemon, which is another word of saying it is the one with a global empire. And of course there can only be one global empire because there is only one globe and we are all on it as far as we know. All the humans in the world are on Earth, and if we're talking about universalism, then you can't be using Catholicism as your vehicle towards nationalism, because it is going the other way. So if you want to go towards A, you shouldn't take a bus that's going towards Z, because it's the opposite of what you want. And this is, in fact, what Catholicism is. So I know that Christian nationalism is the big thing that people are talking about. And some people think it might get somewhere, or they hope it will. But it's, in theory, untenable, incoherent, and unviable. It is like the equivalent of trying to lift yourself up. It can't be done. So this is another reason for rejecting Christianity. And it wasn't even something that I was thinking of. So I was supposed to be asking a question on E. Michael Jones's channel on Rumble and about usury, and and the thing is, I don't really have that much to say about it other than it should be banned, and only Sharia would ban it, and that's it really. If you want me to explain the if you expect me to be like an economist giving you, economic models of, life um, under usury and life after usury, I won't be able to do it. And even if I tried, you wouldn't believe me because you'd all know I'm not an economist. And even if you could find an economist, they wouldn't do it because they don't actually know anything about um, banking without usury, because that's not on any syllabus that they ever learned their economics from. And then if you go to um, Islamic scholars who are supposed to know um, about Islamic and financial instruments, they don't seem to be terribly keen to explain things to you. So, and I'm thinking in particular of Alma Colin, who is this Australian with a website and Facebook page and everything. And I've contacted him a few times, and he either can't or he won't. But anyway, he's no good. So, but we don't need to despair, because basically what we have to do is obey the commandments of Allah in the Quran, and just trust in God and ban all the things that we're supposed to ban and allow all the things that we're supposed to allow. And then eventually things will come right again. But it cannot come right under Catholicism, because, it's basically a busted flush, as well as being idolatry, as well as being universally disbelieved. It's only allowed to carry on because of historical reasons, because it's so pretty. And it's like one of those things that you have that, you can't throw it out immediately. You had to put it somewhere out of the way, because it's in the way. And then, maybe a few decades later, you will finally throw it away because you think, well, you'd forgotten you had it, you'd forgotten where you put it, but there it is, and you haven't used it for years. It's like clothes, really. You have all these clothes, maybe more clothes than you need, and then you stuff them here, you stuff them there, then you forget about it, and then I guess years later you may find that they're too small for you, and then only then will you actually give it away, because it's old, it's moth-eaten, or too horribly unfashionable. You could never think of wearing it in public again. So out it goes with all the other things you don't need. This is what will happen to the Catholic Church and all the other churches, because the arguments really are unanswerable. We don't need an absolute monarchy. We don't need more than one party in our country. This is something that makes a lot of people nervous, and they always think of China, they think of the Soviet Union under Stalin, and they come up with all kinds of horror stories like, political prosecution. It's no longer unknown in the West, this idea that people can be unjustly punished for holding a particular view. And now that we know George Washington warned against political parties, I really don't see how Americans could will argue against that. I mean, they can say, oh, but George Washington wasn't such a nice guy. And the story of him confessing to chopping down the cherry tree was untrue. But the point was that Washington did make that speech. He composed the speech. He might have had help from the others, the other founding fathers, and it's clearly a very, very thoughtful and sagacious document. And we just know, because, well, we know how sagacious he was, because most of his advice has not been followed, with the consequence that Americans are complaining about divisions, unnecessary divisions, doing the wrong thing, refusing to admit it. Being concerned enough to even organize a demonstration against Trump called No Kings, suggests a paranoia, a fear of the future, which I don't think the fear of the future is, what was I saying? I was trying to say, we do not need to fear the future if we do not need to fear the future of walking off a cliff if we cease to walk towards the cliff. That is what I'm really saying. And if we know we're making a terrible error, then we can make a U-turn. If we are approaching a danger zone, having been informed of this, we should stop and turn back. It's really not rocket science. And that is really why I am becoming increasingly optimistic about people being able to accept my arguments after understanding them. I think every day, with every word and every breath, we are getting closer to resolution and correction. There's no way people can say, look, we can go back to Christianity, because nobody believes in it. And to the extent that churches exist, they only exist as a community center. America cannot tell, it has no moral authority unless it repents. And since I'm sure Americans would like some kind of moral authority internationally and globally, then they will have to repent. What are you saying? Eunice Eshmanazar. No offense, but I'm not sure if women can speak on religion, because religion itself is meant to be a coping mechanism and distraction for males with undesirable genetics. I think anyone can speak on religion if what they say is true and logical. I would agree with you that religion is supposed to protect men from women. If that's what you're trying to say, I would agree with that. It's protection for men. What do you mean undesirable genetics? Are, are you saying? I suppose you're talking about a monastery. You're saying that men who cannot find women to marry or have sex with become monks in monasteries, and that is how they can achieve status without having to deal with members of the opposite sex. Is that what you're saying? If so, I actually agree. So thank you all for coming. I'm so pleased that I'm using StreamYard. It is quite pricey at 30 quid a month, but doesn't it look good? It really, and I'm streaming on YouTube and Odyssey and X. And if I got my act together, I could also stream on Rumble. I do have a channel there, but and I did want to know how to stream there, but I've forgotten, and perhaps it doesn't matter. It really doesn't look very nice on Rumble. I much prefer Odyssey. And so I hope I've been reasonably clear about Christianity being a dead end for Westerners and, well, anybody else really. It's not a question of, what race or nation you are. It can't work because you no longer have absolute monarchy. And even if you did have absolute monarchy, that absolute monarchy would not want a pope in a different country to tell their king what to do. So what happened was that eventually all the Catholic monarchs of Europe decided to be their own pope and establish their own church. And then the schism did not stop, because even when the government of that particular country was in charge of its own religion and didn't have to look to another country, people still disagreed with the ways of worship, and then they fought each other and killed each other, and then eventually disbelieved. The wars of the Reformation, I think, gave birth to the American Republic, because I'm sure the founding fathers were disgusted at the terrible fighting that went on for reasons nobody could even explain. And so they decided, when the opportunity presented itself, to entirely reject it. But since then, things have deteriorated in the sense of, well, the birth rate has declined. And because nobody now marries each other, the institution of marriage and the family have been entirely eroded, and this has caused a labour shortage, which has resulted in uncontrolled mass immigration, upsetting everybody, and nobody quite knows what to do. But the answer is simple. It is simple for Americans to say that they can no longer do without a religion, because Americans are not so morally superior that they can do without a religion, in the same way that you can't expect anyone forced to play a game to not be told the name of the game or the object of the game or the rules of the game. And this is, and well, obviously you can't play any game if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing or what the rules are, and nobody is clear. And so if you superimpose a narrative to what seems to be a rather random series of events. I mean, it would just be a random series of events if you don't impose a divine narrative on it. So if you think that the universe was created for a reason, if you were created for a reason, if we were created for a reason, then you can make more sense of things. And I think that's useful for moral, social, and political reasons. Oh yes, Richard Crook, you like the picture. It is supposed to be a pirate ship. I've noticed that the backgrounds I've chosen tend to be of that nature: pirate ships, spaceships, that sort of thing. Maybe it's my spirit of adventure. This wasn't intended to be a long stream. Well, I didn't even think that I needed to explain this, but I felt I should, because it was a new idea that I thought I'd share with you, which doubtless I will refine in the time to come. So thank you all for coming, and you'll be hearing from me again soon.